Good morning. My name is Jake Mormon, and over the course of the next few minutes, we're going to take a look at the history of special education laws and the landmark cases that have paved the way for the tremendous progress that is made through the years for children with disabilities in every school across the country. These special education laws have provided every child the right to an education and also ensures every child has the ability to learn. Over the years, there has been a history of special education laws and landmark cases that have paved the way for special education and where it is today. Brown versus Board of Education took place in 1954. The next major case or law was the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which took place in 1965. Park versus the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania took place in 1971. Mills versus the Board of Education took place in 1972. The Vocational Rehabilitation Act in 1973. Education for All Handicapped Children Act took place in 1975. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act originally was in 1975, but it was last amended in 2004. And then the last case was No Child Left Behind, which was signed into law in 2002. We'll take a look at more in depth at all of these cases over the next couple slides. The first major landmark case mentioned on the previous slide was Brown versus the Board of Education. This case took place in 1954 and stated that education must be made available to all on equal terms. This court case was initially one of the main turning points in the civil rights movement. It established that separate but equal education was in fact not equal to all. This case paved the way for the passage of federal laws that would protect the rights of individuals with disabilities. This led to the Rehabilitation Act, the American with Disabilities Act, and the Individuals with Disability Education Act. In 1965, with the passage of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, schools began receiving federal monies for public education. In 1973, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act stated that a person with a disability cannot be excluded or denied benefit from any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance, either public or private. The Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 requires the additional compliance of school districts and institutions that do not receive federal aid. The next law was the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. This was signed into law April 7, 1965. Lyndon B. Johnson signed the law that brought education in the forefront on the national assault on poverty. It was a landmark commitment to equal access to quality education for all. The act funds elementary and secondary education and emphasizes high standards and accountability in our schools. The law only lasts 5 years, but the government has reauthorized it every 5 years since, and it has 6 main sections known as titles. Title I distributes funds to schools with a high percentage of students from low-income families. It has received the most attention and accounts for 5/6 of all of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act's funds, and it was designed to close the skill gap with low-income children, especially in reading, writing, and math. Title II, it supports school libraries and textbook purchases along with funding preschool programs. Title III is known as the Adult Education Act of 1966, states that secondary education centers would receive funding for additional support for students. It also provided for special education and related services for rural areas, and an amendment of the act in 1968 provided the base for the Education of the Handicapped Act. Title IV gave $100 million over 5 years to fund educational research and training. Title V supplemented grants created under Public Law 874. Title VI provided definitions and limitations of the law. This has been many amendments over the years, and in 1969, Title VI was dedicated to the education of individuals with disabilities. Park versus Commonwealth of Pennsylvania took place in 1971. This was the first major court case that challenged the laws around the country on mental illness. Before this ruling, states could delay education to certain children, especially those with mental disabilities. This case showed that the absence of education can lead to negative consequences for the development of children. The final ruling stated that the Commonwealth could no longer deny any child with disabilities access to free public education. This case only got to the District 1 level but sparked other court cases to come up across the country. One of the most famous ones is Mills versus the Board of Education that we will take a look at next. In 1972, just months after the Park Court case, family and friends of Peter Mills, along with 7 other children, sued the District of Columbia. This was known as the Mills versus Board of Education. Peter was 12 years old at the time and had severe behavioral issues. The school district ruled that Peter's behavior would be too expensive to address in school. They stated that educating children like Peter would cost millions and be a burden to the schools. The district's practice of excluding children with disabilities was ruled unlawful. The ruling stated that no child who is eligible for publicly supported education could be denied it without an equal alternative tailored specifically to the needs of that child. The following rules were put in place that the district had to follow: to provide accessible, free, and suitable education for all children of school age, regardless of disability or impairment, to not suspend a child for more than 2 days without a hearing, and to provide all parties in the suit with publicly supported education programs tailored to their needs. The next act was the Vocational Rehabilitation Act. This was signed in 1973. The act helps people with disabilities pursue post-secondary education, employment, and independent living. Section 504 deals with the federally funded programs and activities and deals with many different avenues besides just education. One of the main things is that no individual with a disability shall be excluded from participating in, be denied, or be subjected to discrimination under any program that is federally funded solely based on their disability. In 1975, the Education for All Handicapped Children Act became law, and later in 1990, it became known as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, also known as IDEA. It was created to address the inequality of educational opportunities. Congress passed the law to support states in protecting the rights and meet the needs of children with disabilities. The law continues to be amended and was done so in 1997 and again in 2004 to provide better equal access to all in education. There have been some major accomplishments under this act. Some of those accomplishments include the majority of children with disabilities are now being educated in their neighborhood schools and regular classrooms with their non-disabled peers. High school graduation rates have also increased, and employment rates among youth with disabilities have increased dramatically. Graduation rates have increased by 14% from 1984 to 1997. Today, post-school employment rates for youth served under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act are twice those of older adults with similar disabilities who do not have the benefit of IDEA. The amount of people with disabilities attending post-secondary education has also increased. The percentage of college freshmen reporting disabilities has more than tripled since 1978. No Child Left Behind is a bill that was technically a revision of the 1965 Elementary and Secondary Education Act. It was an educational reform bill that was signed by President George W. Bush in January 2002. The bill makes sure that no child, regardless of ability, falls behind. It also increases the role of the federal government in guaranteeing a quality education for every student. It also increased the role of standardized testing and accountability for school districts. States are required to test students in reading and math in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school. All students were expected to meet or exceed state standards in reading and math by the year 2014. Annually, it funds roughly $12 billion to school districts across the country. There were a couple major aspects of the act. The first one was accountability. The second one was flexibility. Third, research-based education. And fourth, it provided parents options. The accountability aspect was to ensure those students who are disadvantaged achieve academic proficiency. It allowed for more flexibility by allowing school districts to use their federal education funds to improve student achievement. Research-based education, it focused and emphasized educational programs and practices that have been proven effective through scientific research. And finally, it gave parents options by increasing the choices available to parents of students attending Title I schools. In conclusion, these laws have paved the way for the rules and expectations for school districts across the country. It also ensures that every student, regardless of ability, has access to a high-quality education. Thank you.